Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Colleen, happy journeyer.
Hi, Colleen.
Our reading comes from the Jesus story called Matthew. It's chapter 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep in his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by God, inherit the kingdom prepared for you and from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? When was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me."
Well, I'm super excited to invite up a very special woman today who I think embodies this scripture of caring for the least of these, and you'll hear this in her stories today as we talk about her work as a criminal defense attorney. And so I want to welcome Toya up, if you want to come up, and let's give a round of applause. Hey there, Toya.
Hola.
So let's start with just a simple, easy one. What is some just background information, a little intro, anything that would be helpful for us to know as we get started?
The first thing I have to say is Jacob gave me the opportunity to come up with my own song, and I tried, but they were really a lot darker than what y'all came up with, so I left it to y'all.
Yeah, I was looking for songs. Some of them got really dark, and so I found this one, so I'm glad.
Well, I kind of like Tears for Fears, Mad World. But,
Yes, that was one of the ones I
Sweet!
looked at. That was one of the ones. I almost did that. Maybe I should have done it then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get here?
How did I get here? Well, I was born in Kentucky, which will come be an issue later. We can talk about it. I'm a little disappointed, Jacob, that you left out my status. We'll get to that in a minute. But I come from a Texas family, so my dad had been transferred to Kentucky, and that's the only reason I was hatched there. Other than that, we lived in Texas. I grew up in Texas, in Houston, and
I think that's great. We're happy to have you here. So curious, we're talking about passions. So what is your passion?
So mental health in general, but in particular in the criminal justice system.
And I know you talked about your upbringing inspired some of that. So what is it that makes you passionate about mental health?
Well, so my mother was diagnosed as manic depressive, which anybody that knows anything about it would know that was a long time ago because it's bipolar now. And I watched her struggle with that. And I know we've talked about, you don't say cancer. People don't battle with cancer anymore, and I don't know if that's traveled over into the mental health world or not, but I watched it, so I'm going to call it a battle. That's what it looked like to me. And if we're going to call it a battle, that means she lost it, because she did take her own life.
And I know you talked about that experience has impacted your work. So how how did you get into your work as a lawyer? What inspired you to take that track? I know you told a really funny story about you and some roller skates that I would love for you to share some of as well.
Well, I had already made my decision at that point, but the story before that was kind of funny too, in my opinion. So I was majoring in criminal justice, and I thought, I was thinking CIA or FBI, but then I realized I'd never survived the background check, so scratch that. Nothing major, I just wouldn't have, so why not be a
That makes you
lawyer?
a good company here. I don't know if we're past the background checks or...
So I went to law school instead.
And how did you end up, you were talking about your first internship, how did you end up there? Because that story...
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So I was tending bar at Katz's, for those of you that remember that place.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a regular that was a criminal defense attorney, and I mentioned something about needing an internship, and he's like, I'd love to teach. Come on down to the office anytime you want. And I was like, okay. So I have to do the visual for you. Spiked hair, 5 earrings. My rollerblade pads were pink skeletons. So hey, the office was right down the street from my house. I just rollerbladed on over there. And there was Herschel Moore. Anyway, so his partner in the office was Herb Evans, and they were like the odd couple, totally the odd couple. And so Herschel was all excited about me coming to work with them, and Herb walked down and he saw me in my getup, and he just looked like, Herschel, what have you done now? This time, what have you done again?
And that's how you ended up in criminal defense stuff, because that's what you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does a criminal defense attorney do for those like me who did not know this and had to look it up? What does a criminal defense attorney do?
Represents people accused of crimes. And so in the mental health context, back then, and it's changed significantly now, but back then, if you were on the court-appointed list, you would get a handful of people, maybe identified by the jail, maybe not, that had mental health issues. And as you went along and you did it for a little while, you learned that criminal trespass was a flag. For example, one of my favorite clients, she was arrested at the Radisson for criminal trespass because she was convinced her mother owned it and therefore she did not have to leave. But her mother did not own it. Maybe she did one time, I don't know. But, so,
You want to tell more about that story? Is that the Queen of the Cosmos?
Yes.
Yes. Tell us a bit about her, because I know your work, I don't think all criminal defense attorneys have the knack for mental health. You talked about growing up with your mother and some work you've done personally in therapy and all of that made you prepared for that. But the way you tell the story of the Queen of the Cosmos, I think is really beautiful.
All right. One of my favorite, fondly named Lulus. So I get appointed to this woman. I've never met her. I have to go to the jail and meet her. And I pop in, and the deputies inform me that they have her in solitary because she was combative. And so a rather large female deputy walks me over to the door, and I look in the little window, and I see what looks like to me Mrs. Santa Claus. And the deputy asked me if I wanted her to come inside with me. I'm thinking, I think me and Mrs. Santa Claus will be all right. So in I went, and she starts talking, and I gathered from just the demeanor of the deputy and things like that she probably was combative with them because they were ignoring her, and here comes another loony we have to deal with.
And let's put her locked up, so we don't have to deal with her anymore.
And nobody else does either.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of logic in that, I suppose. But anyway, so she proceeds to tell me when I go in there by myself without a deputy, but it was fine, that she is Queen of the Cosmos. And somehow or other, well, my birthday was coming up, so I must have said something about that before we got to the conversation. She asked me where I was born, and I told her Kentucky, and she said, well, as Queen of the Cosmos, I appoint you Queen of Kentucky. So who knew? Y'all didn't know?
I know, I should have put that in your bio.
Right here.
Kentucky, yeah.
But she also told me that as Queen of the Cosmos, she abolished the court system. And so I said, well, I was aware of that. However, for my birthday, we're going to have a competency hearing. And she said, okay. That was easy. So I get to the courtroom and they have her cuffed in the jury box and she starts clapping her hands together and singing me happy birthday in Spanish. She was cute. And then she wanted to know if I had gotten my birthday cake. And I said, well, no, Fidel, did you make it? She said, no, silly, I can't make it from in here. I called Judge Mary Pearl Williams and told her to order it from Randall's and have blue icing and coconut on the top. So I told her I would check with Judge Mary Pearl Williams, who did exist. And, I didn't, of course, but there was a lot of detail there. So one of the things that you had mentioned on your questions too is I talked to Jacob about how some of these folks, they're like in two worlds. They're in their Queen of the Cosmos world, but she perfectly understood where she was. She didn't see what she had done was wrong in any way, and we weren't even on that. We're not talking criminally insane or anything like that. We're just talking about competency. Can you understand where you are? Can you help your lawyer get you out of where you are or onto where you need to be? So she kind of understood that, and she also understood ASH and what that was. It's the Austin State Hospital, which is a terrible, terrible place to go. But for some people, it's the only way to get your medication, or if she's that far off, which she was, it's kind of the only place you can go to get it. So, I was telling Jacob too, I would find myself sometimes in talking to these people, I just wonder, who am I to be making this decision? And it wasn't the grand finale decision, it was just the nudge, I suppose. If I in my incompetent self, pun intended, was making the determination that she was probably incompetent, then they would bring in a psychiatrist to do an evaluation, then they would say that she was incompetent, and then you still had to have a jury on trial on top of that for that one issue. So, but I question that sometimes, and then I would answer myself. Don't tell anybody that I answered myself. So, what I would tell myself when I would start thinking things like that, it's like, well, who am I? Well, I'm unfortunately or unfortunately for them, I am their advocate, and the only thing that they have right now to get them moving along to where they need to go. So that was my answer to myself.
Yeah, I'm curious, how were you able to meet your clients where they're at? Because you're talking about like they're in these two worlds, and I think that example of the Queen of the Cosmos is a beautiful example of not denying her story, but entering into it in a way of like, it's like, yes, this can be true or not, but right, what matters is connecting with you. And it's a Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus looking lady behind a metal door, been shoved away by society. So many people in prison are there because they have mental health, problems that they're struggling with. How are you able to meet with them? Because I don't think everyone can do that. I don't think everyone has that gift. How are you able to walk confidently into that room and not be scared, and you even mentioned that judges would call on you because they knew that you had an act for this.
Well, I really truly think that a lot of it is just listening, all of us just want to be seen and heard, and people with mental illness are no different. And if you have somebody raving that they're the Queen of the Cosmos, a lot of lawyers won't listen to that. Well, just shut that aside and let's deal with what we got to do right now. And that doesn't work.
You had mentioned there is an individual who had wrote something that he wanted submitted to the court.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell about that?
I think I was his third or fourth lawyer, I'm not sure. But he was a very smart man. Both of these people that I'm talking about are very intelligent people. And he felt like that driving while license suspended and possession of marijuana were constitutional violations because he had a right to travel and he had a right to exercise his religion. And so he had written all these motions, and they were single-spaced handwriting, very small, all the way around the edges of the paper. And he wanted them filed. He wanted somebody to see them and read them. He wanted a judge to rule on them, and his peach lawyers would not file them for him. So by the time I got him, I sat there with him and I listened to him explain all of his motions and his arguments, and they were actually kind of good. It was a little scary because I sort of understood what he was saying. But anyway, so I did file them for him and was able to show him a file marked copy of them. And the judge, before they brought him out from the jail, asked me if she needed to read them. And I said, no, Your Honor, they're very interesting, but we don't have to. And so when he came out, he wanted to know what her ruling was, and she said that she had read them and considered them and listened to my arguments, and they're all denied. But he was happy. That's all he wanted. He wanted somebody to hear his argument. And so we did. And, you couldn't always do that, but I did it whenever I could. So.
Man, that's why I think the scripture really resonated with your story for me, is the idea of what we do for the least of these matters. And I think so often people can get into the this is my job, I just do the thing. And you even said some people are like, I know I'll get some money from this, and I can just, whatever, deal with these crazy people and just whatever. Let them accept their fate, they're in trouble, they deserve this. But I think you stopped and you're like, this person deserves to be heard and listened and cared for, and their story honored. And I think that is such a gift that, I think all of us could benefit from, even if we don't suffer from mental health stuff, is more people like that in our lives. So another thing you had mentioned that is separate from that, but I think it also goes with your passion for mental health, is that you were involved in a peer counseling program. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Super cool stuff. It's called Reevaluation Counseling, and it's a community-based type thing where you learn to counsel one another. So, for example, perhaps Jacob would be the teacher, not me, and we would learn how to counsel one another, and there's different techniques, and it's basically designed to get to whatever it is that's hurting you or hindering you in life, and get to it quickly. And you can't do that without really listening, and really listening to the person, and not in your head going, oh, that happened to me, or that happened to Sue, or whoever, and this is how they handled it, so that's what I'm going to say. You can't do that. You listen to what they're saying and how they viewed that happening to them or whatever it was, and then you give them a direction that will get them to go exactly where that is, where that hurt is, and discharge it. That's the lingo. You get re-stimulated by things, and then you discharge it in a session with somebody focused completely on you. And I even did it to Jacob. I'm like, see, this is how you start. Both hands. We can't do it with these stupid microphones. But both hands, and you just look. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people to do. It was uncomfortable for me, I can tell you that. I didn't like it. But I got over it, and it's really effective. So.
I think it reminds us how deprived of intimacy we are. In Cameron's discussion, we talked about this, everyone's on their phone, and then through COVID, we lost contact. But I think this isn't a new thing. I think we're always been this way of, we get in these individualized mindsets. That's very American culture, Western culture. It's you have to be on your own, you gotta do it on your own. And we forget that sometimes you need someone to hold your hands and look you in the eye and be like, I hear you, and I hear your hurt, and let's work through it. You don't have to stop there. I'm with you. And it's cool that this is all peer counseling. This is lay counseling. Yes, y'all are trained, but it's just a group of people who meet one-on-one. This is work we could do at Journey. We were talking about maybe we should do this at Journey, is get someone to come in and teach us this so that we could practice it. I'm curious, how did your work in reevaluation counseling aid your work as a criminal defense attorney?
Well, I think most people like to think that they're a good listener. I like to think I'm a good listener, but I think RC really, if you're not any good at it, then people don't play with you anymore. You have to be able to counsel one another, and that's the beauty of it. It's a community thing, and you learn how to listen, and listen only to them, and not stop. You have to stop your brain from churning along with what you want to say, or just what I said earlier about. It's natural. I'm not dogging anybody that does that, because I still do it, and I have to think about it hard to not do it. But that's what I learned in RC, and with people like the Cosmos. I just listened to her and the guy with his arguments. Just really listen to them. And if I wasn't really listening to the guy with all the constitutional arguments, then I wouldn't have been able to discuss with him, really hear what he was saying, because you do have a constitutional right to travel. But what I explained to him is that that's true, but it is your mode of travel that's causing you problems. That does not fall under the Constitution. You cannot operate a vehicle without a license because you can hurt others and things like that. And he understood that. But he wanted me to hear his argument of his constitutional right to travel. Doesn't that sound good? Everybody has a constitutional right to travel. It's true, but
which is such a gift to like enter into that again, like honoring his story and his argument. And like you said, he's a very smart person. Just because someone has mental health doesn't make them somehow less intelligent. Like they're living in these two worlds of yes, they're struggling with this mental health thing, but also they know where they're at, they know what they're doing, they're competent. There's probably times when people are less competent and that has other ramifications. But I love that you are honoring their story as valid and not immediately going to explain it away or, oh, you're crazy, whatever, just let the judge rule and you don't need to read it. You're like, no, I'm going to read it. And you even said you had good arguments. Like, what a gift of saying, yeah, you have a point. And man, we need more lawyers like that, I think, who will believe us. So this question is a big one, and I don't expect you to have the perfect right answer, but it was just one that I kind of thought of after our conversation is how can we overcome the stigma around mental health? Be that in like law settings or, just out in the world.
Well, I think that we're doing it right now. I think that it's so different now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, especially when my mother, it was like if you did not admit you were going to counseling because that meant you were wackadoodle. And it wasn't even called counseling. I think it's like, oh, she's seeing a shrink. Is she crazy? Or But I think the times have changed, and even in the criminal justice system, I haven't been doing it for a while now, but it's changed a lot. There's attorneys that specialize in it now on both sides, and that on both sides is critical because another story I told you about was a prosecutor after one of my clients had been found incompetent and sent to ASH, and it's a horrible place. It's a horrible place to go. They do the best they can. I'm not dogging ASH completely, but it's just not a great place to visit, or be stuck at or anything. But then she wanted him to take a hit for everything he was arrested for and do more county time. And she just didn't understand. She didn't understand he had already been punished, basically. And so, I totally forgot what you asked me. And
but I just
read off on things.
No, that was great. And you had mentioned with her that you were like, have you been there?
Yeah.
And you're like, go look at it. And she didn't, right? But she...
Well, she had never been to ASH. She'd never been to the county jail. And I said, well, at least go out there and look at him. And she wouldn't do that. But she ended up giving me what I wanted, so I was happy.
Well, my last thing is, are there any last pieces of wisdom you can leave us in regards to your passion for mental health in the criminal justice system or beyond? Just stuff that's lingering for you.
Well, I think I'm preaching to the choir with this with Journey people, but all I can say is listen. Really, really listen. That's all I got.
That's plenty. That is amazing. Can we give a round of applause? We've been having people offer questions or any thoughts, so if anyone has something, Colleen, I don't know how far this mic will go, so you might have to come up. It'll go here, so that's as far as.
Even though I have a loud voice.
Well, first of all, Toya, thank you for sharing your story. And my question is, during the peer counseling, how do you keep your mind from wandering?
I would say practice. It really, you just have to practice, and once you experience the benefit, okay, so I don't know how many people in this room have been in counseling, and I'm going, so you're paying somebody to listen to you, right? So there's that. They're good at it, but there's that. So in this RC, you're trading time. So it becomes, to me, almost more important because you're, like I said, if you don't listen and you don't, and they, your co-counselor can tell if you're not listening because you're not giving them any direction. It's not effective. It's not working. So they don't play with you anymore. So you just it's practice and practice, and just don't even try to just listen to what they're saying and not. Who cares if you have a similar experience? I guess that's it. Who cares if you have a similar experience? You're just listening to what they're saying, and how for them can you get to the meat of the matter.
I know in all the like counseling courses I've taken, it's always like, this isn't a skill you have to be born with. Like, you can learn it. Like, you can build this up, and it's not easy because I think our mindset is so, oh, I relate to that story, let me say it because it gets excited. And I think there's sometimes in a normal conversation, we don't have to counsel everyone, that's okay. In a normal conversation, it's okay to bring that up. But there's sometimes where it's good to go, I'm gonna practice something intentional, and I'm not gonna make this about me. I'm just gonna enter into your story and allow your story to shine through, which I think is a gift.
Well, and I just want to add too that I'm not saying it is not beneficial for you to share an experience with somebody. Sometimes that is helpful, but if you're doing RC, the whole thing is to focus on each other individually, very intensely, focus. And I had another thought and just floated away.
Well, I also had a thought. So I went to this preaching cohort 2 weeks ago, whatever, and we were talking about, it was a bunch of pastors talking about counseling and therapy and stuff, and someone said if I mentioned my therapist in a sermon, it would be like a curse word in my church. And I thought, if your pastor can't say it, who can say it? And I think that's one thing that I value about Journey is that we can sit here and talk about, things like our mother, passing away from suicide, and these kind of things that society hides, and we lock in a cell and we put it away because that's like the highest, mental health institute are prisons, because that's what we do. We think we criminalize the fact that you're struggling, and we put you away and we lock you away, and we don't want to hear it or see it. And if you're combative, even if you're an old lady how combative can Mrs. Claus really be? I guess if you're the Queen of Cosmos, you have some power behind you, but we just push people away because we don't want to see it. We want to hide from it. And I think the gift of what you did in your work as a criminal defense attorney is you stopped everyone and said, this person matters, and this person's story needs to be heard. And because of your experience with your mother and your own counseling experience, it gave you the ability to say, everyone's story is important, and they are of value, and they matter no matter what mental capacity they have. Are there any other questions coming up for anyone? Any thoughts that y'all want to share? Natalie?
I just want to say that from working with women in prison for so long, teaching them to tell their stories, when we heard our second class, we had one woman start by telling the most painful, dramatic story ever that we had heard. And she told it so without lying about anything, that it just triggered the entire classroom. There were like 30 women, and they all just went down. And we ended up, for that class, we had to change the way we were doing it and just let them, at first, just tell their stories. And they were just re-traumatizing each other one after another because everything was bringing up so much. And when we, after the end of hearing these almost 30 women tell their stories, we went to the prison coordinator of our class and said, we don't know what to do. Is there a counselor? Is there somebody who can talk to them? And they told us that they had psychologists, and the psychologists come to each prison one day a week, and they will only see people who are considered either going to kill someone or suicidal. So only people who were at that level are allowed to get any meeting with a psychologist. And the substance abuse person said, you need to do what I do. You need to tell them to say, I had a bad upbringing, and that's in the past. And this is where I am now, and this is where we're going to move from now on. And that wasn't what we were called there to do. We were there to give them to tell their stories. And so what we did was we just met with them and said, what you've done is You have all traumatized each other by your stories, by your true stories. And we're going to take you back to the format of creating a 5 to 7 minute speech that you're going to be able to give to an audience. But you are here, you've heard each other. You all have heard each other's stories, and we've heard your story. Anyway, it's just so real what you're talking about. The people who have been traumatized, there's nobody for them to go to unless it's us, unless it's whoever happens to be encountering them. And
yeah, well, that's at the whim of the warden.
Absolutely, at the prison. But those people that you met with saw you see them and hear them.
I hope so.
Yeah. And I just think that all of us, one time or another, one way or another, one person at a time, including someone who maybe sits down beside us on a bus or whatever it is that we're uncomfortable with, we all have the choice of whether we're going to listen to them where they are or meet their eyes, show interest. And you do that, Toya.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other things y'all want to mention, ask, questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Scott.
I'm just going to get on y'all's level. I thank you so much. This was incredible. The work you do is so important. What really comes through for me on top of this like amazing level of listening is like an empathetic respect for the people that you're working with. I overheard this conversation yesterday of like 3 adults. One person asked, like, do you think empathy can be taught? And the other people were like, you can teach it to children, but if an adult doesn't have it, they can't learn it. And as a therapist, I was like, no, I disagree. I'm curious, like, what the room's thoughts, like what your thoughts are on listening, if empathy is needed, and like if that's a skill that we can learn, or if it's something that we just are born with. I don't know.
That's a good question.
I do think you can learn it. I think that some people are more inclined for one way or another, for one reason or another, whatever, to be able to do it more naturally. But I think anybody can learn. I mean, okay, maybe not everybody, but most people can learn. I really think so.
I think what you said with the reevaluation counseling is when you experience yourself, it's easier to give it. And I think that, like, when you think about grace, like, the only way you can give grace is if you've received grace first, or, you know, like, I can listen well, or I can love better because I've first been loved. And that's, like, I think a very spiritual thing of, like, we love because we were first loved. And I think that is where I would go with empathy. Like, it is easier to have empathy for others if someone has had empathy for us, because then that transforms us. Love transforms us in that way.
Yeah.
Mary?
You know the storyteller in me. That is a question that I have asked so many people, Skylar, because I believe it's the key to us being in community and in relationship, to have empathy. And we run into people that don't have it. And my question, using the brain, is can it be taught? A lot of stuff, and we are coachable and we are to be educated, and that's what life is about. A year ago, we have a child in our family. My niece is blind and has several disabilities, not just blindness. But she reached a point where she comes to the blind school. You know, they work with her all the time in Arlington. They live in Arlington. But she comes to the blind school to learn social skills and, you know, so. But there was a story, and I thought this was so powerful. I thought, I'm asking this of learned people that I know. I've asked this question many times, in many situations, and I'm learning from a child in our family. And because she doesn't see, she was in a group setting, and a little boy on a trike ran into her. Well, Kennedy lost it. She's a very calm, affable child, but she didn't see, because she has no sight, that this child was coming at her, so she couldn't get out of the way. She couldn't, and so she got hit, and it scared her, and she reacted, she cried, but the teachers, we don't do it alone, do we? The teachers stopped and started to come around her and say, we're sorry you got hurt. But the rest of the conversation was, the little boy didn't know that you cannot see, and we need to think about what happened to him. There were two of you in this engagement. That's not the language they use, that's my language. But two of you were involved in this thing. You need to think about and ask him if he's okay, And I thought, so simple, but the bigger picture was they were teaching Kennedy empathy. What you don't want is a child going all through life knowing they have this disability and blaming everything on everybody else. They were teaching her to say there were two people in the interaction. That's what does. When we walk in here, it's not, I don't stand over here. I'm engaged with each one of you, I hope. And I just thought it was brilliant, and it helped me understand a little bit about you can teach. And then, like 3 weeks later, her grandmother, she has no fear. She was coming downstairs, and of course, we were always counseling her, be careful, hold on to the railing, because she's blind and she doesn't have good motor skills, lots of disability. But she's scared, her grandmother and her mother, because she took a fall. They got so upset. And later that night, Kennedy was laying next to her grandmother, my sister, and said, Nanny, yes? Kennedy, what is it? She said, I'm sorry that I scared you. Now, that was an awareness in a 5-year-old child that had been carefully taught. Thank God for teachers and helpers, and that she could then parrot that. And we know cognitively she got it. She knew her grandmother was upset. She loves her grandmother beyond measure. And she could say, so when I listen to this, I think, this is the only thing that works, isn't it? I mean, you don't just assume that everybody knows that. So I guess I'm kind of getting my answer, Skylar, to my age-old question, can you teach empathy? It's the people I gravitate to are people that can be present to me and be empathetic, but we can't assume everybody has those skills, right?
Yeah, I want to sum up that a little bit for the Zoomers. So Mary told a story about her grandniece. Her grandniece who is blind and who got hit by a little boy who had sight. He was on a trike and hit her, and she was really upset. And the teachers helped her say, like, are you okay? But also, he didn't know, and helped him see both sides. And so then in a scenario when she fell and scared her grandmother, later in the evening after she had calmed down, she said, I'm sorry I scared you, and held that space. And so Mary's just saying that, yes, we can learn empathy. And what you said about I think people are drawn to empathetic people because I think all of us need that. And I hope at Journey we get to try on these muscles, we get to work through that. Like, this is like training grounds, so we go out in the world and we meet with people who may not be as empathetic, that we come with a gifting that I think is a gift from God, that is saying, I will see you where you're at, and I'm going to try my best. I'm not going to get it right every time. I may mess up. I may not hear you because I'm going through my own crap. But I'm going to try to be more awake, more present to the moment. Do you have any thoughts on that? Sorry, I just started talking.
Works for me. I guess the other thing I'd want to add about RC and what you had said, Nathalie, is that, and Mary too, presence. That's the big thing to doing RC. You have to be present in the moment, calling to be able to shut off your thoughts, present in their moment. And for the ladies in the prison, pick an emotion and they're going to feel it in there. But if somebody in the class beforehand could say, you're gonna want to go down this re-stimulation path, but let's not. Let's listen. Let's all do the best we can, because we're going to screw this up. But let's do the best we can to just hear Nathalie for right now, and then we'll listen to Vicky. And don't think about your stuff. Easier said than done.
Cameron?
I'm over here thinking about competence. That, like, in the example of the woman who was the queen of the cosmos, it's like all of us in here, we have ears to hear that kind of language. Like, it sounds mystical. But she's in prison. It's not going well for her. But for me, I feel sometimes when I grow spiritually, I feel less competent in that way. I feel like I'm not staying on the ground, and like, what kind of competence is there that's available anymore in a world that's like upside down? I just wonder, like, because I feel sometimes like I'm losing it, and yet when I talk to people, I have a degree from the university, and I do my hair kind of, or what I do enough that people construe me as sane, but I don't. I don't think I'm competent, and I just come back to what they say about Jesus. He's demon possessed and raving mad. Why are you listening to him? And it's like, his trial didn't go great, and Socrates didn't go great either. So I just wonder, like, not just as a lawyer, but as people that want to stay sane, but where's that path to stay sane and heartful at the same time?
Yeah, for the Zoomers, I'll just repeat some of that, not as beautifully as y'all always say. But Cameron was bringing up the idea of competency and how when we're on the spiritual path, there's times when we feel incompetent. And I think that goes back to what you said, who am I to say? Who am I, this flawed human who's also just trying to stumble my way through life? Who am I to say who's competent or not? And also, when we enter into these mystical realms, there's times when we lose our grounding because we have to. Like, we can't stay. There's a gift in it. There's a gift of, going insane or going sane, losing that sense of, I don't know, that reality, that grounding. I think there's some gift of being in both worlds, as you said.
I guess what sanities are available? We have a legal standard that we can say this person's incompetent, but like, you look at the world and it's so crazy.
Insanity is not a psychological term. It is only that's a law thing. That's not like a counselor can't say, oh, you're insane. That is only a law thing, is my understanding. I'm looking at Woody and Toya thinking that, but...
No, I'm listening to you, and I hear you saying, about you question your own, for lack of a better word, sanity sometime, or competency. Well, the difference between us and our wanderings in our mind is we don't land in the pokey because of our wanderings. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is, it's different. But again, we're all on our own path. We always think we're so far from that, but we're only a couple of steps away from
Well, and I think I tried to, I can't explain it all that well either. It's kind of like, so we know if somebody is diagnosed with depression or bipolar, so you have that diagnosis and there's treatment for that, there's counseling, there's medication, blah, blah, blah. But then delusional bipolar is the ones who, she truly believed she was queen of the universe. She really did. And I'm trying to think of, I can't think of another good one that truly believed. They just believes, I don't know, Cameron, it's a really good question because...
You have to have a stark standard legally. I get that part, but I believe, in the last years, I've become very available to magical explanations to phenomena, whereas before that I was very grounded in science, but I would understand if I was in court, I couldn't tell the judge, well, I saw a sign and I read this mystical book. I know that's not relevant.
Oh, you could. I had a client that did that, and I was looking at the prosecutor object or something. I can't do it.
Right. So I noticed, but I've lost friendships, and I feel like my heart goes out to people that are the queen of the universe, because it's like, we're all embodied and we're all vibrating something stranger than us, and it's hard to grapple with it. And I fear for my sanity constantly. That's all I'll say. And I know that people are standing by to go, "You're great," and I go, "I know," but there's a lot to deal with, and I guess those people end up, across the table from you often because reality doesn't come together in a way that's simple.
Yeah, but I think again it goes to the gift of, when people are in these spaces, when they're losing the sense of sanity or whatever we want to call it, like, how do we show up and not demonize them or call them bad or evil, or how do we enter into their story to say, okay, yes, I'm here with you. You're the queen of the cosmos. Okay, I'm the queen of Kentucky. And I'm here with you, and I'm going to look for that. I still want that blue birthday cake with the coconut icing, like that's what I want still. And I think it's getting out of that mindset of we have to judge it and make something better or worse, and just saying, I'm here with you. I think of people with dementia, and oftentimes my grandmother had dementia, and so it was difficult because sometimes the stories didn't line up, and they would change, but they would repeat, and you had to let go of what is truth, and you had to enter into, I'm going to be with you. In seminary, there was a time I went to visit with a woman. I was doing a hospice class, and so I went to visit with a woman who was in an assisted living place, and they said she had word salad, where she just said words, but it wasn't coherent. And so I was like, how do you pastor someone? How do you be a chaplain? How do you come in and do anything? And so what they said is she really likes books. And so what you do is you would look at magazines and you put up pictures, and she would laugh and laugh. And I was laughing. I don't know why I was laughing. And she would just say some words, and I would repeat back the words, and she would look at me like, you got it. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I said. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm saying, but I am going to meet you here. And I think there's different levels of, some people end up institutionalized, some people don't. But I think it's always a gift to meet people where they're at, because not everyone can do that. Vicky?
Another thing, which reminds me of dementia, my mother had dementia, she was in a facility, but the nurse there told us, because I would say I go to dementia land with her.
Yeah, go to dementia land with her.
Yeah. But she said there was a woman where she had worked before who would say, "Does the bus stop here?" And she said if you told her, "No, the bus doesn't come," she would just cry and fall apart. But if you said, "Yes, sit down and wait, it will be here in 5 minutes," and she would very happily sit and wait and then forget and wander off. But it was listening and going with her and not trying to contradict her, because if I ever tried to contradict my mother, I got the stink eye or anyone else. I just had to go.
Because that's their reality. They don't know anything other. It would be like someone being like, "Your name is not Toya," and you're like, "Yes, it is. My entire life I've been Toya," and being like, "No, you're not Toya." And
I'd probably believe you.
Yeah, and then it makes you question, and then you start questioning those basic things, and then it kind of unravels like, oh no, if that's not true, then what is true? But that's the big question. But for time's sake, I want to wrap up our conversation. Do you have any other final thoughts you want to say, or? Well, thank you.
Praise that was given on Zoom.
Yeah, online. What do we get?
So Jennifer said, "Amazing perspective. Thanks for sharing." Anna said, "May we all feel the light of being king and queen of the cosmos." They are.
Thank you,
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Namaste. The light in me bows and recognizes the light in you. Thank you, Toya, for seeing that light in all of us.
Beautiful.
Well, let's give a round of applause for that. Thank you, Toya. You're gonna have a seat. Thank you. Help me.
Help us.
Thank you. Wow.
Wow.
Amen. We're going to sing a song. They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love. I thought it fit really well, but we're going to change it to They'll Know We Are Journey by Our Love, because that feels more us, right?
I want to get to know you. Thank you.
are gathering here, but know that it doesn't end here at whatever time it is. The week is just beginning. Remember, empathy is feeling with someone, not for someone. That becomes sympathy. So go into the world today and practice some empathy. We can all be taught. Part of it is we have friend bags, and they're not going down as quick as they should. So I'm going to put it in the blessing. But to add to the empathetic gift of a friend bag, ask that person's name, because they don't just become a beggar on the side of the road, they become a person. And they realize they're being seen as one. And congratulations, you have just learned empathy. Because we are all beggars too. We're just telling other beggars where to find bread. Go in peace.